Welcome back. The death toll in that brutal terrorist attack in Moscow is said to stand at least 133. Islamic State K has claimed responsibility for the atrocity, but that hasn't stopped Russian President Vladimir Putin from trying to link it to Ukraine, claiming that the attackers planned to reach the border across which they had negotiated passage with the Kiev government. Here to provide some analysis is Russia security expert Adam Yor. Adam, welcome back to the programme. Did it take you by surprise that this attack, which appears to be very clearly ISIS-K, has been linked by Putin to Ukraine? Did that surprise you?
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd just like to start by expressing my condolences. This is to the people concerned in this. It's a real awful human tragedy. As you say, 133 people now said to have lost their lives in that, and 152 people are injured, according to the latest figures that the Russian government has put out. In terms of the way that the Russian government has responded to this, I'm not surprised. I think the immediate reaction from other analysts watching the situation was that the Russian government and the Russian authorities would be very quick to try and implicate Ukraine in that. That was the fear among, as I said, many observers, and I imagine the British government. What's happened is that very quickly, military bloggers and other media associated with the Russian state and who support Putin very quickly started to undermine any connection that ISIS was involved in this. That started very quickly after the attack on Friday evening and gathered pace through Friday night into Saturday morning. And yesterday we were left in a situation where Putin himself clearly pointed the finger at Ukrainian involvement.
Why does Putin take a while to react to situations like this? I think it was the best part of 24 hours, wasn't it, before he said anything? Is that because he's kind of trying to work out which lie to tell?
I don't think so. Following the way that the media and information space worked very quickly after the attack, I think the Russian authorities and supporters of Putin and people who control the media that promote his regime were very quick to build up a information space and information platform, planting material in various sources, which then fed into state media and into what Putin said in terms of, as I said, undermining the ISIS link, which has been put forward by Western media and also Western governments, and trying to, as I say, point the finger at Ukraine. So I don't think that was hesitation myself. My sense is that that was a carefully coordinated and in some ways quite effective media operation by the Russian state and its proxies.
Do you think Putin in any way felt vulnerable that he could be accused of having ignored warnings that were given to him by the Americans?
I think there is a part of that as well. We have talked about Putin using this in order to mobilize public sentiment, gather support, further support for his actions in Ukraine and intensifying aggression there. I think a large part of this as well is to deflect attention from the seemingly obvious faults of the Russian security services, their inability to defend innocent Russian civilians, despite the warnings that were clearly passed on from the US government.
There were air raids yesterday on Kiev and on Lviv. Do you imagine we're going to see a general intensification of the war by Russia against Ukraine?
It's very hard to predict what happens next. I think the pattern is that the war will intensify. We have seen a spike in violence and attacks over the past couple of days. I think it's very difficult to foresee exactly how Putin responds to the tragedy, to the attack in Moscow, and how he implicates that. The fear among many observers, and I think among the Ukrainian government, is that there are precedents in the past. If you look at the attacks in 1999 on civilians in Moscow and in other cities around Russia. That was a basis on which Putin launched a very severe wave of violence in Chechnya, and was actually the basis for his first presidency. I know we talked about the elections last week, but regardless of who was responsible for the attacks in 1999, beg your pardon, that was a real foundation on which Putin started his rule, and to some extent, we could use that as a stepping stone, really, to see where he goes from here.
Why would ISIS-K attack people in Moscow?
That is a difficult question, I'm afraid. I'm not an ISIS expert, so I don't have any information into that. As we said, the US government did seemingly have intelligence that ISIS was preparing an attack on possibly a concert hall or a public space. The US intelligence community does have a duty to inform, so it is obligated to pass on information and intelligence about attacks to anyone who might be threatened by that, and that does include governments which it might not like. So I think it is clear that the US government did pass on information about the potential threat of an attack to the Russians. I think the question is, for the Russian government, why didn't they respond to that?
And Russia has been involved, as you mentioned, in Chechnya, and Russia has been involved in Syria. So Russia has been involved in conflicts where ISIS and ISIS-K have an interest. What would you say of the mood in Moscow at the moment, Adam?
The immediate mood, I think, understandably, is one of shock and mourning. We've seen billboards with candles all throughout the city and other parts of the country. We have seen people all around Russia and also in other parts of the temporarily occupied territories in Ukraine filing to leave messages of support and condolence. Russia is no stranger to these types of attacks. I know the last serious attack of this nature was a long time ago. My immediate understanding, like I said, it is one of shock. I think just that the questions will be for us in terms of how the Russian government goes forward on this and potentially exploits that public sentiment.